Good morning, America. This is the Cats Roundtable. John Catsimatidis here, Sunday morning. It looks like there's going to be a change of administrations. What's going on in the world, and how is our country going to deal with it? With us this morning is Dr. William J. Parker. He is a longtime national security expert, was in the Navy for a long time, and foreign policy expert. He's one knowledgeable guy. Good morning, Dr. Parker. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing great, and it's good to be back on your show again.
What's going on in the world? What part of the world do you want to start with?
Well, I think if it's okay with you, I'd like to start with the U.S. and work our way out today because we have some immediate challenges that I think we need to look at for the next administration.
Well, tell us.
Well, I think internationally you have the same actors that the last couple of administrations have had to deal with: Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, and I think we need to talk about those in maybe a little more detail in a moment here. I think domestically we need to continue to work this COVID issue hard. And then we also need to work to get America back to work as quickly as we can. And then finally, there's the internal administrative challenge, if you will, which is ensuring that we get political appointees, the right political appointees, in position in day one. A reminder to your audience that there are 4,000 political positions out there, of which 1,700 are Senate confirmable. So you have a lot of people that transition every administration. And it's important to get them in earlier and not later.
And do you think, under the last 4 years, under Donald Trump, President Trump, do you think he made a lot of mistakes not transitioning some of the people that were in there from historically?
I believe strongly that there needs to be a right and left seat approach, if you will. In other words, for pilots out there, they have a left seat, right seat to make sure that the guy flying the plane has somebody next to him to ensure that he can take over at a moment's notice. And so I think it's important that the people that are in those positions now are not thrown out on day one, but that you have a turnover process in place. Something I've recommended to the last couple of administrations, that they have that turnover process of a left seat, right seat process. And I think it's important for this one as well.
It seems like President-elect Biden has been choosing a lot of middle-of-the-road people, and he's got the left wing of the Democratic Party a little bit upset at him. Is his choices better or worse than you expected?
I would expect that that he will continue to adjust as he sees reactions from the rest of the country on this. I think that you will see that he's going to have to face certain key issues. I mean, at the end of the day, he's going to have to deal with this JCPOA issue with Iran, and by that I mean the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or the Iran nuclear deal, remembering that the P5-1, China, Russia, France, the UK, the US, and Germany all signed off on that in 2015, and then it went away under the Trump administration. And so will that come back, or will some form of that come back, I think is important. I think he's going to have to deal with trade, and specifically trade with China. He's going to have to deal with the 9-line issues with China and the potential biological threat, whether intentional or unintentional, with China and other countries. I think he's going to have to continue to work the issues with Russia, whether it's cyber, nuclear, or their impact on NATO. And quite frankly, when you look at Russia, the reality is that there are a lot of things that Russia and the United States have in common. Both predominantly Christian countries, both have a China threat. Neither one of us have had a good time in Afghanistan. Both of us have an opioid crisis. So there's a lot of commonalities there that I think we could get after to perhaps bring those two countries closer together in some ways that would resolve some of these other issues. I think he's going to have to deal with North Korea, and he's going to be tested by North Korea on day one. I really do believe that. There's an organization out there called the Global Peace Foundation. It's run by a guy named Dr. Preston Moon. They've been doing this for years, and all they look at is global peace and partnerships between Korea and the rest of the world. And they're pretty darn good at it. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. So I think those issues, in addition to the environment, if you'd like to talk about that a little bit, I think he's going to jump into the environment heavy. And you can argue whether or not that's important, but I definitely think he will.
Is China going to challenge him as far as Taiwan? I mean, they already took over Hong Kong. Is Taiwan next?
Well, I think Taiwan is under a great deal of a threat right now, maybe more than ever. It'll be interesting to see what happens in those first couple of weeks after the change of administrations. Do you ensure that you have the right strike groups and the right people and equipment in place in case that thought is there? I've always thought that the United States is most vulnerable during that transition, and that's why that peaceful transition of power is so important, and that you have this overlap of people to ensure that while the new people are coming in learning their political appointee positions, the folks that have been dealing with it for the last 4 or 8 years are still there to help, at least with giving them background. They may not agree politically, but they need that background. So I do think that China and North Korea in particular could be major issues to deal with in the first days of the new administration.
You've been in national security for a long time. Who do you view as the number one threat between China, North Korea, Russia, Iran?
I think that the number one threat to the United States is the United States. I think that when we are aligned, there's nobody out there that can counter us economically, militarily, strategically in general. When we're not aligned, I think we're very vulnerable. So the major threat that I see, I still say, which I've been saying for the last decade, that I thought a biological threat was the greatest threat against the United States and against the globe. I think COVID proves that once again. In the book Guaranteeing America's Security for the 21st Century, we went into that in great detail to discuss why that is a threat. And so it may not be Iran, North Korea, China, Russia. It may be yet another third party that comes in and somehow gets a hold of the right biological agent, yellow fever, or epidemiologically something that transfers from person to person easily, as COVID does, that is a major threat to the United States. So I'm more worried about how we do business internally as a country than I do any individual threat of another country outside of us.
It's Christmas weekend. We're coming on to the new year. Anything else you'd like to tell the American people?
Well, I think that the environment is going to become a big deal with this new administration. They've already said that several times. I mean, the reality is you are going to have about 100 million people worldwide displaced over the next century if we continue on the track we are on the rise of the ocean. So I think we need to take a very close look at that. I think we do need to take a very close look at decarbonization. But the very good news is that this country, the United States, has found a way to ensure that we are able to have our own energy, that we are energy independent now, which is something we weren't in years past. So I think it's more of a good news story than a bad news story. I think that we'll get after COVID here. I think that the vaccines will begin to work well, and we're going to have a much better 2021 and 2022 than we did 2020.
Dr. William Parker, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for your wisdom for all the American people, and thank you for everything you've done for our country and continue to do for our country.
Thank you very much. Great to be on your show again.
Thank you. This is the Cats Roundtable. We'll be right back.